The ability to kind of get up, dust yourself off, get back to it, I think is the real secret to achieving your dreams.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. I created this podcast to give you inspiration and let you know you're not alone in feeling stuck in midlife. I also invite you to join the Age Agitators Club for women, where we come together monthly to hatch our plans for making waves as we age. Being part of this community for women will remind you on a regular basis that you're not too old, and it's never too late to do that thing you've been thinking about. You can find more information at latebloomerliving.com/community, and I hope to see you there. Hello, my friend. Hey, did you know that today, the day this podcast is coming out, October 9th of 2024, is Ageism Awareness Day? Did you even know that was a thing? Well, it is. And it's important, folks. And this is why I believe it's important. One of the main reasons that I even do this podcast is because I had so much internalized ageism backing up within me in my 40s that I was not even aware of. And it was holding me back from living my best life. It was holding me back from trying new things because I was looking in the mirror at my changing body and my changing energy levels and all kinds of stuff, thinking, oh, here it goes. This is the beginning of the downward spiral. This is where it's all downhill from here, folks. The old gray mare ain't what she used to be. That kind of stuff was coming out of my mouth. Every time I'd misplace my phone or my keys, I was having a senior moment, but here's the thing is that when we make those jokes, we're actually compounding this ageist idea about ourselves. And it's not our fault. We've been surrounded by ageism in society in so many ways, in advertising and conversations that you'll hear. If you really start to open up your ears, you're going to hear it. It's crazy. And as we get older, all that ageist attitude starts to become self-referential, and that's when it impacts our lives and the choices that we're making on a day-to-day basis and how happy we are. And so I just want to bring this to your attention as something to think about, something to start paying attention to and be aware of, because when we can become aware of something, then we have a choice in the matter about how we're going to react, how we're going to live, what we're going to do next. And that all comes from awareness. And I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest because she is doing something that I think is incredibly important, which is bringing together generations of women to tell their story. Her name is Georgia Clark. She's an award-winning novelist. She's also the creator of Generation Women, which is a celebrated New York storytelling series that she started in 2017, bringing together women and non-binary individuals that are spanning the generations. She's got team 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, up to, in August, I think she had somebody in their 90s up on stage telling their story. And this is important because a lot of times what happens to us as we get older is we start to feel invisible. We start to feel insignificant. So I'm thrilled to talk to her about it. Again, I'll mention she's an award-winning novelist. She's got a new book coming out next week and lots of exciting stuff happening. And Georgia, thank you so much for being with me today. I'm excited and thrilled to talk to you.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Yvonne. It's such a pleasure to be here. I can't wait to get chatting.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I would love to start by talking about your inspiration for Generation Women. What prompted that for you?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. So Generation Women, as you mentioned, is a multi-generational storytelling night. We invite a woman or non-binary performer in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s plus at every show to tell an original story on a theme. So we start with Team 20s, we end with Team 70s plus. So at every show, you'll see the theme expand and become explored through the generations as each sort of age group responds to it. The show started here in New York City, where I'm talking to you today, and it started in 2017 after a conversation with my mum, Jane Clark, and she shared with me the experience of becoming invisible as she got older. Really, some of the things that you were talking about at the top of the show. She said that the older she got, the more it felt like people were just looking right through her on the street. And previously, when she would get on a bus or walk into a shop or walk down the street, there being a sort of a usual acknowledgement from people around her, the bus driver, the shopkeeper, and that was starting to just fade away, and that people were just not seeing her. And she felt like she was being erased from society. And it really hit home for me. It wasn't as if ageism was a completely new concept, like I'd never heard of it before, but it hit home in a different way because it was my mother. And it was someone who I loved that was telling me this sort of painful truth. And it made me really mad and sad. And so I decided to do something about it, which is always a good thing to do when you feel mad and sad. So I started this event in the summer of 2017. And we had, we started with a small show, and we had sort of, at the time, mostly women come up on stage and share their stories and share their funny stories, sad stories. But really, what we tend to program is stories that are uplifting and inspiring and empowering, and that tell the truth about life and aging, but in a way that feels celebratory, and it brings the community together. And we see that we have so much more in common than we have different from each other. And what I really found and what I really noticed is how hungry people were for this intergenerational mixing and to be able to connect with people of different age groups.
Did you instantly, with that first get together, did you have Team 20s, 30s? Was that fully formed as an idea to have somebody from each generation?
We didn't have at the time Team 70s. We started with 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So we had 5 storytellers, and I host the show and I tell a story at the show. So 6 stories on stage. But to be honest, I didn't really know a lot of women in their 70s in New York. And so that was I think we added that age group. It was only a few months as the word started to get out there, because you're naturally networked into certain communities, and most of them are people around your age. And so it just took us a while to kind of like find those performers. And now I feel that's one of our almost easiest. That's always one of our easiest teams to cast, because the word gets around and everyone does the show, tells their friends they want to do it. And women in their 70s are so excited, and no one's usually asking them to do a storytelling show, and so they're keen, they're great to work with, and that's sort of definitely one of it's the secret sauce of the show. Like, our superpower is that Team 70s slot. And because we end with Team 70s, they essentially, like, are the sort of the closer. They're the headliner of the show.
Yeah.
And by that stage, the audience is so hot, the audience is real warmed up. And if I introduce, and sometimes we have someone in their 80s, and if I say, we've got a special treat for you tonight, like we're closing the show with someone in their 80s, everyone's like cheering and yelling. It's like this real kind of paradise where, if you're a woman in your 80s, you're like a rock star in our room. And we do the show at Joe's Pub in New York City, which is a great theater, part of the public theater, really legit. And we also have shows. We have a show starting in New Jersey. We have shows in Sydney and Melbourne and Seattle and Montreal. Maybe a show starting in Connecticut. So, the wildfire is spreading for Generation Women.
Oh, that's exciting. Were you always at Joe's Pub? Did you start somewhere else and then eventually move over to Joe's Pub? How has this
Yeah, we
grown?
really kind of grew the show at Caveat, which is a fantastic theater in the Lower East Side. It's more of a comedy club, cabaret venue, they do a lot of improv and stand up, and they're very interested in stories around science-based kind of storytelling and humor. And we had the show there for many years. And then slowly we're able to, my aim was to get it to Joe's Pub. That was my dream. And we would start with like maybe doing a one-off show there. And once they could see, oh, we can bring an audience, like we can run a show. So
Yeah.
now we're there pretty much every month.
So here's a question I have for you. I mean, you're a writer, so you're naturally a storyteller, but there's a difference between being a writer, publishing a book, sending it off into the world, that can be a fairly solitary experience until you get to like book promotion time, I imagine. Storytelling on stage in front of an audience is a whole other thing. So, where did that come into your life, regardless of Generation Women? Like, were you doing storytelling events before this?
That's a great question. And you're right. They're two very different skill sets and identities, I guess, because novelists do, we work alone and it's a long game. Novels take years to write. You tend to be creating them with a very small team. It might just be your agent, your editor, early readers, very small. And then there's no real performative element to it apart from doing, book launch events and things like that. But I really enjoy performing. I grew up doing acting and just really for fun. I wanted to be a screenwriter, and I always felt I liked bringing people together. I liked doing events. When I first moved to New York City in 2009, I got into improv comedy, and I did improv for like about 7 years through
Ah,
the Upright Citizens Brigade Theatre. I was on a
oh yeah.
house team briefly, and I was on an indie team that performed every month. And we would do a monthly show. It was really fun, but it was very slapdash. I mean, it was, tickets were $5. You paid cash at the door. We would always forget to get change. People would be kind of sitting on milk crates. It was at some black box theater in the
Oh my
city.
God, I've been and it is so much fun. It's not there anymore, right? Is it has
That was,
UCB
we used to do a
closed?
lot of actually, UCB just reopened their new theater on 14th Street.
Oh, that's
So highly
exciting.
recommend. I just went and saw a show. It was really great. Still a massive improv fan. And I did that for many years. And then when that kind of came to a close, really as my novel writing, I was at a stage at improv where it's either you go pro or you go home. Like, and people were starting to like make moves into becoming professional comedians and being on TV and getting onto SNL and everything. And I was like, that is not my path. Like, I want to be a novelist. So I that phase of my life ended, but I knew I wanted to keep doing a show, but I didn't want it to be as slapdash. I wanted to do a show that felt elevated and that felt like a night out and felt like a proper theatrical experience that you would like get dressed up for and go and expect to see a produced show. So that is definitely our vibe at Generation Women, from every touch point, from either like dealing with our performers, dealing with the audience. Like I have a high standard for everyone and for myself in creating, really well told stories. I work with the storytellers on all of their stories. And I created something that I think I'm really proud of, and that, the strength of our audience shows that they're really enjoying it as well.
That's fantastic. Were you doing so after between improv and Generation Women, were you doing storytelling like I'm thinking of the Moth.
Right.
There's a lot of different storytelling venues. Were you going and doing like story slams, things like that?
I
Or
I did a show that what really gave me the storytelling bug. I got bitten by a show that was in New York for many years called Women of Letters, which was a show where the conceit of the show was you write a letter to something. And the show I did was a letter to my Achilles heel. And so the story format is dear something. And so every show would be like, it's a
how
letter to
fun.
my mother, a letter to my love, whatever. And I did it at Joe's Pub, and I never forget, like, my heart walking on stage, my heart was pounding out of my chest. I mean, it felt like a basketball. I could barely hear the host like doing the opening bits. And then I went first, thank God. And I did my story. and people laughed, and mine was my Achilles heel was cheese, which it is. So I did my whole story about cheese,
Cheese is the
and
best.
people were laughing. And afterwards, I was just on this high, and I see it now in my performance. It's the same experience. They're very nervous in the green room. They're walking on stage, they do their story, everyone loves it. And then at the end, they're just like, that was incredible. And it really, like to your earlier point, having these two kind of identities as both as a novelist who squirrels herself away and types up her books and is living in a dream world, her own internal dream world, and someone who gets to host a show and be able to talk to people and give hugs afterwards and be more kind of public facing in that sense. It's a really good mix for me, because I think that we are also complicated and we do contain multitudes. And even if we are, maybe I'm naturally an introvert, but that doesn't mean that I don't like people and being out. I wouldn't want to probably do it every night of the week, but it's such a fun thing. And I never really liked the competitive aspect of it. I don't, as a creative, like as someone who creates art and puts it out there, every artist will tell you winning and losing is just feels terrible. I know how hard it is to create art of any kind. I know how hard it is to put it out there. I know how hard it is for it to not be received in the way that you hope. And so I really wanted to, when it came to creating my own my own idea, my own house, that would be a house that everyone wins. And, it's a celebration. And it would not be appropriate for Generation Women to have any kind of competitive element, because the whole point of the show is bringing together the generations and showing us as equals on stage, and sort of seeing like that there is no anyone's better or worse compared to their age. Like no one's any wiser, although of course I do think that like there is a lot of more inherent lived wisdom, but just I guess like a more like better or worse or funnier or not as funny or anything like that. What people really like about the show is that there is this real sense of camaraderie and a flattening of the sort of ages in just this little space, in just our little corner of the world.
It's the stopping to listen to each other, having the opportunity to listen to somebody who comes from a different generation than you or a different background than you. It's such a gift. It's such a gift. And this is why I felt like you were the perfect guest to have on today, around the idea of ageism, as it goes both ways. There was a time in my life when I was younger where I felt too young to do things. And then all of a sudden, I felt too old to do things. I was like,
Yeah.
where's the Goldilocks zone? Where's the just right moment? Ageism, it spans all kinds of things. I hear people talk about millennials and Gen Zs and and there's all this trash talk about an entire generation, and you're lumping people in to this idea of who they must be because they were born within a certain decade, and it's ridiculous.
Yes.
It's ridiculous, and it goes in all directions. So to bring generations together, to allow people to be seen and heard, and to allow people the moment of listening, it's a gift.
Yeah, and you're right that, in this world that we live in right now, 2024, where we spend so much time on our phones and so much time on screens, just to give people the chance to sit in a room with a glass of wine and deeply listen to another human being's story for an hour and a half is it's almost unusual to have that time and space, and you can't sort of like swipe and scroll away. It's profound, and people really do have profound experiences at the show. I always say at every show, you'll laugh, you'll cry, and it's such a human experience. Storytelling has existed in every culture since the beginning of time, like music and art and dance. It's the ways in which it's so much more than entertainment, although the shows are very entertaining, but it's a way in which we make sense of ourselves, we make sense of others, that we share our lived experience and our stories, and we express ourselves creatively. And I really love that the show is part of such a storied tradition. It's not, it's so meaningful to me, and it's so I definitely feel like I learn something new at every show. I feel inspired by performers and what they've gone through, what they're going through, what they've accomplished. Like it's so much, we don't tend to have a lot of celebrities do the show. And one of the reasons why I like programming sort of people who have a less of a, unusual experience, I guess, of the world is so that we are putting forward stories that are just so relatable. Like you really will think, well, this woman's just like me, or, this non-binary person is just like me. And it's so impactful to feel that connection with somebody else, perhaps a stranger that you've never heard before, but to hear their words. And a lot of the stories, I feel like a theme that I really get drawn to and I like to program is resilience and grit and determination. That is their ideas that come up over and over and over again.
Yeah, here. I am wondering, I have so many questions exploding in my brain for you right now. Okay, the first one that I want to hit is, have you, since you started doing this, do you have new friendships that are intergenerational friendships? And what has that meant for you, for your life, and the way you look at what's possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is yes, I do. I famously only go to lunch with people over 70. So when we first did the show, our Team 60s performer, and I was looking for someone in their 60s, and I really didn't know anyone in their 60s, which just feels funny now because I just feel like I know so many women in their 60s now. But a friend of mine said, "Oh, you have to invite my friend Janice. She's my intergenerational friend." And I had never heard that expression before, intergenerational friend. And Janice Maffei, who did the first show, was in her 60s. She was so warm, so fabulous, so funny, and we became great friends. She became so inspired by, and this happens many times, is that the show is profound and a turning point for people, and that a new chapter starts after this. It just happened the other day. I had a woman who just said, I'm wearing dresses. I was in a dark place, and after I did the show, I feel like everything changed. And for Janice, we had a spin-off show briefly called Funny Over 50, which was like a showcase for comedians and storytellers over 50 who are funny. And we started the show. I always wanted to hand it over to a host who was over 50. And Janice took that show on. That show is now I believe, a quarterly showcase. Look out for it on Instagram and the web, Funny Over 50. Janice was my sort of first intergenerational friend that I made. And then since then, I really love going and having lunch with, I just had lunch with my friend Judy Rabinar, who did the show. She's in her 80s. My friend Diane, who is the oldest working female comedian in the world, recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records. She just turned 90. I see her. And just other performers. I love these friendships because, and of course I have friends around my own age group, but I find it very relaxing being around people who are much older or much younger than me. Like, I can get caught up in the, I'm still renting, shouldn't I bought a house by now? Like, like my neighbors have done that, like that kind of idea. And I feel like when you spend time with people who are sort of decades different from you, they're just not thinking about life in the same way. And the conversations you can have are just much more expansive. And I'm just very interested in their point of view. I like to know what they think about things. I like to know what's on their mind and how they perceive the world. And so, yeah. If you see me in New York City, I'm probably like out to lunch in the West Village with someone who's 75.
That's fantastic. Has it changed the way that you think about yourself?
Yeah, well, I remember, you just mentioned this earlier, the idea of like, where is the sweet spot? I clearly remember being in my early 20s, maybe 23, and being out with a group of friends. And I think it was like around early 20s, that sort of 23 point is, I think, the first time where you might meet someone who's like 18 and you're like, oh, wow, like I'm 5 years older than you and you're out here at this party. And my friends started to refer to themselves as old. Like, we're so old now, like 23. And I remember thinking, if I think I'm old at 23, I'm going to be old for the rest of my life. And maybe this isn't such a good idea. And I remember kind of resisting that and like I'm not going to get into this whole dialogue about how old we are now, because I know it's not true. I know we're all just kind of kidding around, but there was something about it that as soon as you decide you are old, you are old. I mean, you make your own reality, right? So I've always felt quite youthful in myself. I also have always felt my age. I don't feel like I'm 44. I don't feel like I'm 27. I don't feel like I'm 35. Like I feel my age. Um, but I also have I moved to New York when I was 29. I sort of feel like I reset and have my 20s all over again because I just spent, like half a decade going to improv classes and staying out until 2 in the morning, drinking with comedians and, having regrettable sexual hookups and all those sort of things that you do in your 20s. I met my wife when I was 33. We got married when I was 40 and I became a parent when I was 42. My mother became a parent at 25.
Yeah.
So just the experience of being like a young mum, having my daughter's 2.5 now. I'm not that, I live in Brooklyn and parents are definitely older who people are waiting to have kids until they're older. But I feel, both youthful for my age and sort of and my age. I don't have a lot of hangups about my age. And I think one of the reasons why is because I spend so much time with older people. If you only spend time with your friends or much younger people, then it can be easy to start to feel old. But I remember doing a Funny Over 50 show and walking into the green room. And so all the performers for that night were over 50. And I said something fell out of my mouth. I was like looking in the mirror at my my lines around my eyes. And I said something like, oh, I feel old. Like it just fell out of my mouth. And everyone in that room just looked at me like, oh, honey. And I was like, I heard it. I see my mistake. And I just remember that whenever I sort of think that old thing, I think, oh no, you got a ways to go. And I didn't also like through the show and our philosophy of the show is just I really want everyone to feel empowered in their age, whatever it is, and to feel good about that. Not to say that I'm blind to the realities of aging. My mother famously tells me how terrible aging is all the time. Like she's just like, oh, it's awful. She's just so I'm not sort of living
Everything hurts. Let's just say everything hurts.
My friend Pam Vassell, who's one of my Team 70s friends who I see, she tells me that when she sees her friends, like friends her age, she's like, she has a rule where it's 1 minute on grandkids, 1 minute on doctors, 1 minute on illnesses. That's it.
Oh,
like she's like, I don't want to be sitting there talking forever about your knee. Like, so which I thought was so funny.
That's a good rule. I think I'm going to have to adopt that. I
Yeah.
freaking love that. Oh my goodness. Here's a question for you. I always say that the stories we tell ourselves have incredible power. They are the beliefs that operate in the background. Let's say we have an operating system that's running us. Those are beliefs, those are stories. And do you see some kind of empowerment, I think is what I'm trying to ask. Do you see some kind of empowerment with people being able to get up on stage and tell a story? Is there something there in the examination of an event that gives people power that maybe they didn't have before they stepped on stage with that story?
Yes, and that's such a great way of putting it. I definitely agree that there are a million iterations of our own story, and we can tell many, many different versions of what that story is. Stories that paint us in many different ways, as being, great successes, great failures, exact same life events. And so I think that one of the things I find interesting about storytelling is that flexibility and the flexibility that exists within each of us to frame our experiences in ways that can be the kindest and most complimentary towards ourselves. We have our goals in life, things we're working towards. And as soon as they're in spitting distance, like as soon as we realize, oh, I'm actually going to meet that goal, we shift them back, we move them away.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can spend our entire life feeling like we're almost there. and that we're, it's just, but we don't kind of realize and look back over our shoulder and see all the goalposts that we've already moved past. And, I'm a writer. So like for many people, like the first step is I want to get an agent, I'm going to get a book deal, and of course it makes sense that we want to, as soon as we meet those goals, we kind of move on. But the trap can be getting caught in just sort of thinking that unless like this sort of thing that's now at the next big kind of lofty goal, so if we don't sort of reach that, then all of the other accomplishments that we've had are meaningless, or that just sort of don't matter, because the next goal, the one just over the horizon, is what really matters. It's ambition, which I write about and I think about a lot, because it's such a powerful force in my life, and has been a hard taskmaster for me, but has also helped me to achieve many of the things I wanted to achieve. But I do see that when people tell stories, and especially like, I think especially from older women, that their accomplishments are celebrated by younger generations and by younger audience members, because, these audience members are just sort of, some of the younger audience members are just starting out in life. They haven't had their first big tragedy. They haven't had their first big loss. They haven't had a big curveball thrown at them yet. That's coming. And I think that being able to hear, like when I was talking about resilience earlier, I do really see that as being such a defining quality of certainly creative success, and really anyone's success, is the ability to keep going. I really believe that resilience and grit and the ability to persevere is what marks someone who is able to sort of keep moving forward towards their hopes and dreams, less so than actually any kind of success, and certainly less than talent. Talent and luck, they play small roles, I think, in our lives. But really, if you want to be, I've like talking about failure earlier, like if you want to start a storytelling show or like write a novel, you have to just kind of know that what goes with the territory is a lot of things not working out in the way that you intended them to. And the ability to kind of get up, dust yourself off, get back to it, I think is the real secret to achieving your dreams.
Love that. The difference between being and doing is what's coming up for me right now. And talking about ambition, I host rooms in Clubhouse, and one of the most recent conversations we had was basically the question, is ambition and gratitude, are they mutually exclusive? Because gratitude is such a key to happiness. But then there's like this thing that is within me, because I've also got this ambitious part of me. And I think, okay, if I am grateful, does that mean that I shouldn't want something? Can I be grateful for what I already have, which is I have a great life. There's a lot of wonderful things about my life. Is it wrong to want more? That comes up for me. That's just what popped up for me as you were talking. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I'm a living embodiment of someone who is grateful and ambitious. When I signed up with my publishing company, I said to them, I want to be a New York Times bestselling author or die trying, and either option is fine with me. So, just know that I'm going to work my ass off to like go for this goal. But if I don't make it, I'm going to be happy, and I'm happy now. So that,
really
and that was not always how I felt. I would feel like I want to be a New York Times bestselling author or die trying, and if I don't succeed, I'm going to be sad or disappointed or feel like
right.
whatever.
And until you get there, you're going to be miserable because you're not there yet. So then what kind of life are you living if you can't be happy in the process of it, right?
Yeah. But amazing. I think that, you absolutely can be. I feel very grateful for my life. I feel grateful for my health and my family's health and for so many things. But I also am someone who has always been a real little doer and getting out there.
Hey, we're going to take a quick break here so I can tell you about an awesome resource that I think you're going to love. Here's the thing. We are always works in progress. Do you find yourself wondering, what do I want to be when I grow up? If so, then I think you're going to want to subscribe to We're All Getting Older, which is a weekly newsletter written by Lou Blazer, that's all about continuing to grow and get better in the second half of our lives. We're All Getting Older is a sponsor for this podcast, and I'll tell you, I get so much benefit from reading Lou's newsletter every week, and I think you will too. She writes the newsletter for midlifers who believe in getting better as we get older and making the most of life's second half. So if you want to subscribe to that, it is on Substack, and you can easily find a link to subscribe at loublazer.com. That's loublaser.com. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Do you find that people are able to work through some personal demons, like just in telling their story?
Yeah, and I recommend storytelling as, even if you're not telling a story of Generation Women, storytelling as a technique can be an incredibly powerful way to work through difficult, the harder parts of life, whether it's just, writing the story down. Often, with every difficult thing, there's multiple people involved. There's a technique of writing the story from someone else's point of view. Like if you got into a life-ending fight with your best friend, a friendship-ending fight, telling the story from their point of view, and, like
Which
that.
you did in Island Time quite a bit. I loved that the chapters flipped and you had a different point of view in each thing. And so somebody would have a fight and then you'd have it from that person's point of view. And then in the next chapter, it's in the next person's point of view. So that must have been a fun process for you.
Yes, that was my last book, and it's an ensemble family drama, romantic comedy, and it has, I think, 7 points of view. And it is one of the fun things about working in the ensemble format, which I do in my books, which is sort of connected to my interest in bringing people together and seeing things from different points of view, that you are able to just kind of like see the biggest picture of within a group of people. And within that book, so just briefly, the premise of it is two families who have nothing in common except for the fact their daughters are married, are unexpectedly stranded on an island off the coast of far north Queensland when a tsunami, a big weather event, traps them there for 6 weeks. And what is meant to be a 3-day kind of let's get to know the in-laws begrudgingly holiday turns into a transformative experience for every person on the island. And there's only 9 of them, I think. It's a teeny tiny island. And I wrote that book in COVID during lockdown because we were all sort of in the same situation where everyone had been going along in their lives, living their lives, and then we're suddenly jolted off track, stranded and stuck, and reassessing our entire existence, and suddenly having the time to ask questions of like, am I happy? Is my life working for me? What about it could change? What about it needs to change? And, I was seeing in real time that experience happening with people ending relationships, quitting their jobs, moving across the country, starting new hobbies, ending different things, and how and that happens for all the characters in the book. They have to sort of reassess and discover new parts of themselves. And so that was such a fun book to write because it was really reflecting what I was going through, what society was going through at the time. And I also got to sort of armchair travel to Australia, which I couldn't travel at the time because the borders were closed. I was here, and they had all these really intense kind of procedures for getting back into the country that I couldn't do. And so it was a way to sort of feel like I was traveling to Australia. And the book is modeled kind of on my family and sort of be able to see my family in the world of fiction.
So fun. And I love every character in your book, that each of them has an arc that nobody is the same person that they started off at the beginning of the book. And they're just, and you don't make it easy. I love that there's not an easy ending. Yeah, I can just see that exploration in seeing where those characters go. And I love that you do have a tendency to work in ensemble. That's a pretty cool tie-in between what you're doing with Generation Women and what you're doing in your books then.
Yeah, bringing
Yeah.
together a group of people, seeing the, similarities, the ways. I mean, we are meant to exist in community. We are human beings. We are not meant to be individuals like, no man is an island, no woman is an island, no one is an island. And so I like what happens when we bring people together. And so I sort of do it through both the storytelling series and my books.
I love it. Well, speaking of books, so now you've got a new book coming out next week,
Yes.
and there's a holiday theme, I
There
think.
is.
Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
right?
So this book is called Most Wonderful. It is a queer Christmas rom-com set in the Catskills, New York, upstate New York. And it's about three adult siblings, each at a personal and professional crossroads, who reunite at their larger-than-life's mother's Catskills Manor, her estate, for an unforgettable Christmas, where they all arrive heartbroken, single, and then the magic of the season and some unexpected visitors will sort of change all of their fortunes by the end. And I wanted to write a book that was, I love Christmas stories. I mean, I love the holidays. But I never really saw, my experience as much, and my sort of sense of my taste, what I like, and sort of my kind of like love stories as a queer person represented in most of the kind of mainstream holiday stories. So it really is the book that I felt so excited to write, and to create something that was both, cozy, and that you would want to just like snuggle up with a hot toddy by the fire and read. But that's also, it's kind of a little edgy, and has like a bit of a wicked sense of humor. And I wouldn't compare it to Hallmark because it's not that squeaky clean, let's say. And
Having read Island Time, I imagine it is probably not.
yeah, it's this. Look, modern romance has like a lot of sex in it, and these characters have sex as well. So but it's coming out next week. I'm so excited. I've got several book events on, a big Generation Women show on October 15. We have both shows at Joe's Pub, 6:30 and 8:30 with two different casts, and our theme for the night is Most Wonderful: Stories of Hope and Joy. So we are going to be having a big uplifting love fest, and each ticket includes a copy of the book. So you can keep it for
Wow,
yourself or gift
so
it to the
cool.
reader in your life. And then my book launch event in a bookstore is on October 17th at the Ripped Bodice, which is New York City's only romance bookstore in Park Slope. And I'll be in conversation with Becca Freeman, the co-host of the Bad on Paper podcast and author of The Christmas Orphans Club. So that's on Thursday, October 17th.
That is all fantastic. So, what's the best place for people to find you and follow you?
So you can find me online. I'm at georgiaclark.com is my website. I mentor a writers group for pre-published novelists who are working on romances or women's fiction. So we have a group of writers who are all working towards submission to getting an agent and getting book deals. And then I also have a storyteller group, which is for storytellers who are doing more short form work. So work for the stage, like Stories for Generation Women or personal essay. So you can sort of see more about those on my website. Our website for Generation Women is generationwomen.us, and that's where you can buy tickets. You can see more about our various offerings. We host a writers retreat several times a year, which is a beautiful 3 days, 3 nights away up in Catskill, New York, for writers of all kinds. I'm on Instagram at Georgia Lou Clark, and we're also on Instagram through Generation Women at generation_women.
Fantastic. All right. So, I will have links in the show notes for anybody who's driving, unable to get to a computer right now. You can just go to the show notes for this episode, and I'll have links to things for you there. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story and sharing stories in general. Like, just thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your interest. You'll have to do the show.
I would love to. I would love to.
Yeah.
I'm like, what would I talk about? I have
Yeah.
some good stories. So yeah,
Okay,
I'll
we'll
have to
we'll
work
make it
something
happen.
up. That would be great. Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you.
Wow. I hope this conversation with Georgia Clark got you thinking about the power of intergenerational friendships and sharing our stories. Do you have any older friends? Do you have any younger friends? Go get one, or two, or three, or four. There's so much we can learn from each other, no matter where we are in life. And remember, it is Ageism Awareness Day, so I encourage you to start listening. Start paying attention to the subtle and not so subtle ageist tropes that we hear in everyday conversations and the media. Aging sucks. It's all downhill from here. Oh gosh, just you name it. Actually, I have a challenge for you. It is possible that you're listening to this podcast on some other day than Ageism Awareness Day. Either way, I challenge you to start paying attention to the ageist ideas that surround us and influence our thinking every day. Awareness is the first step towards any kind of change that you want. And the more we tune in, the more we can push back against those outdated ideas. So when you are in a conversation and someone says, aging sucks, I wonder if you might just take a minute to appreciate that aging is also a process that helps us build our resilience muscles. Every challenge that we face makes us a little bit stronger, and that's something that I am practicing embracing. That's all I'll say about that. So thank you for being here with me today, and keep blooming, no matter what age you are.